"I can fix your eyes," the little girl whispered to the billionaire, unknowingly unraveling his wife's darkest secret. The city's Central Park was alive with the hum of a Tuesday afternoon, the sun weaving through ancient oaks to paint dappled mosaics on the manicured grass. But for Julian de la Vega, that golden hour was nothing more than a fading memory, a mental snapshot dissolving a little more each day. He sat on the varnished bench with a spine of steel, the rigid posture of a man molded by Europe's most elite boarding schools. Julian mechanically straightened his silk tie. His navy suit, bespoke Italian tailoring, clung to an athletic frame, while pitch-black aviators shielded the tragedy that had rewritten his life story just 6 months ago. A total, freezing, permanent abyss. At 32, Julian was supposed to be the man who had everything. He possessed an inherited textile empire, estates across 3 continents, and a wife the tabloids hailed as the ultimate trophy. Yet, as he sat there clutching a white cane against his knee, he felt like the most destitute soul on earth. The chirping birds offered no peace, only annoyance. The distant laughter of children served as a cruel reminder of the legacy he would never build. "Please, Julian, stop fidgeting." Vanessa's voice sliced through his brooding like a scalpel. She stood a few feet away, thumbs hammering rapidly against her smartphone screen. Her red skirt suit screamed authority, crowned by a blonde coiffure so heavily lacquered that even the wind didn't dare disturb it. "I have a board meeting in 40 minutes. I told you dragging you out for fresh air was a waste of time. You should be back at the manor with your handler." "I just wanted to feel the sun on my face, Vanessa," Julian replied, his baritone voice heavy with exhaustion. "I haven't left that house in weeks. I feel like an inmate in my own home." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I'm doing this for your own good. In your condition, you're fragile. People stare at you with pity. Don't you realize that?" Vanessa sighed loudly, never lifting her eyes from her device. "Wait here. I'm going to grab a bottle of sparkling water. This heat is unbearable." "And don't talk to anyone." The staccato click of Vanessa's stilettos retreating down the stone path echoed in Julian's heightened hearing until they faded into silence. He was left alone, wrapped in his personal void, knuckles turning white as he gripped his knees. The isolation weighed heavier on him than the blindness itself. That's when he sensed a shift. It wasn't a sound, but a presence. Someone had stopped directly in front of him. The atmosphere changed, carrying a scent that clashed violently with the park's pristine nature. It wasn't Vanessa's imported French perfume or fresh-cut grass. It was the smell of wood smoke, mildewed fabric, and a faint, sickly sweet undercurrent of stale vanilla cookies. Julian's muscles locked up. "Who's there?" he asked, tilting his head, trying to use his ears like radar dishes. No answer came, but then he felt it. A hand, tiny, rough, sandpaper skin weathered by elements and neglect, landed with the lightness of a feather on his forehead. The contact sent a jolt through him. Julian, who had recoiled from human touch since the accident, sat frozen. There was no fear, only a bizarre tranquility that washed down his spine, drowning out the city traffic. "I can bring your sight back," a child's voice cracked, fragile yet remarkably assured. Julian swallowed hard, completely thrown off balance. The girl's hand remained on his brow, radiating a warmth that seemed to seep into his empty sockets. What are you doing?" he stammered, unable to pull away. "Your eyes aren't dead, mister," the girl continued, her tone possessing a gravity far beyond her years. "They're just sad, deeply sad. Grandma says sorrow turns off the lights, but if you pull the sadness out, the light comes back. I can pull it out." Standing before him, invisible to Julian, was Lucecita. She was only 8, but her wide, dark eyes held the weariness of a century of struggle. She was drowning in an oversized gray hoodie, 3 sizes too big, and mapped with haphazard patches and dirt stains. Her hair was a chaotic bun, and her sneakers had holes where her toes peeked through. Yet she stood with a regal, solemn dignity. As she held her hand against the billionaire, a lump formed in Julian's throat. No one had touched him with genuine compassion in years, not even his wife. Vanessa touched him with clinical efficiency or irritation. Never like this. "What is your name?" Julian asked, feeling a traitorous tear welling up behind his dark glasses. "They call me Lucecita," she replied, gently retracting her hand. "But my name doesn't matter. What matters is that you need to see again. There are things you are missing, and it has nothing to do with your eyes." Julian was poised to ask what she meant when the staccato violence of Vanessa's heels cut him off, hammering the pavement with renewed fury. Vanessa froze in her tracks, roughly 10 meters out. The water bottle slipped from her grip, hitting the concrete and rolling away across the path. Her mask of icy perfection shattered, twisting into a visage of sheer, unadulterated terror. Her blue eyes locked onto the ragged girl standing before her husband. It wasn't possible. She had made sure they were far away. She had paid to make them disappear. The child turned, meeting Vanessa's gaze not with fear, but with a quiet, damning recognition. "You!" Vanessa shrieked, her voice cracking under the weight of sudden panic. "Get away from him, right now!" Her scream shattered the fragile, magical peace that had settled around the bench. Julian flinched, completely thrown off by the raw aggression in his wife's tone. Blind instinct took over. He reached out into the empty air, trying to shield the child, terrified of what Vanessa might do. "Vanessa, wait!" Julian commanded, struggling to his feet and leaning heavily on his cane for balance. "She's just a child. She hasn't done anything." But his words fell on deaf ears. Fear had hijacked Vanessa's senses. She sprinted the remaining distance as if running for her life. She reached Lucecita and shoved the small girl hard by the shoulder. The frail child stumbled and collapsed onto the grass, landing without a single cry of complaint. "I told you I didn't want you anywhere near him. I warned you." Vanessa roared, shedding every ounce of the elegant composure she guarded so jealously in public. She spun toward Julian, digging her fingers into his arm hard enough to bruise. "Julian, we are leaving. She's a thief. These park people are nothing but pickpockets. They use—" His face flushed with anger. He loathed it when she treated him like a helpless invalid who couldn't perceive reality. "She was speaking to me. She touched my forehead. She said she could heal me." A sharp, ugly laugh escaped Vanessa's throat. "For God's sake, Julian, she's a filthy beggar with delusions. She's probably high or insane. Just look." Her voice didn't waver in the slightest. She stood tall, locking eyes with the woman in red. "And you, ma'am? You smell like terror." The words hit Vanessa like a physical slap. She stumbled back, clutching her chest in shock. "What did you just say to me, you insolent little brat?" Vanessa hissed the words. Julian, tracking the child's voice, took a tentative step forward. "Why would you say such a thing, little one?" Julian asked, tuning out his wife completely. "Why do you think she's afraid?" Little Light stepped closer to him, paying no mind to Vanessa's death glare. "Because she knows exactly who I am. And she knows the lies stop the moment you sit at the old table," the girl stated with shattering clarity. Julian's heart began to hammer violently against his ribs. A powerful wave of déjà vu washed over him. The old table. That phrase unlocked a fragmented memory buried deep in his mind. Something from before the Swiss boarding schools and the high life. A rough wooden table in a tiny kitchen, someone serving him steaming hot soup. "Enough of this!" Vanessa shrieked, panic hijacking her senses. She tore open her designer purse, grabbed a fistful of large bills without counting, and flung them right in the girl's face. The cash fluttered through the air before settling on the grass and Little Light's worn-out shoes. "Here, that's enough to feed you for a month. Now get lost and don't you dare come near us again." A heavy silence fell over the park. Passers-by froze, eyes glued to the unfolding drama. An elegant socialite shaming a street child in front of a blind man. But Little Light didn't flinch. She didn't bend to pick up a single dime. She kept her gaze locked on the face hidden behind Julian's dark glasses. "Money can't fix your eyes, sir," the girl said softly. "And it can't buy forgiveness either. Grandma Matilda is waiting for you." She didn't want the hush money this woman offered 5 years ago to make her disappear, and I don't want it now. Hearing the name Matilda, Julian felt the earth drop out from under him. His cane clattered to the pavement with a hollow thud. His hands started shaking uncontrollably. "Matilda," Julian's voice cracked, dissolving into a hoarse, broken whisper. He turned toward where he sensed Vanessa standing, his face twisted in a horrific mix of hope and betrayal. "Vanessa, you told me my mother died 3 years ago. You showed me the death records. We stood right there at her gravesite. That was it." Vanessa had nowhere left to run. Cold sweat trickled down her spine. She scanned the area, desperate for an escape route, a distraction, anything to stop this. "She's lying, Julian," Vanessa screamed, though her confidence was cracking. "It's a classic con. These people dig up dead relatives' names just to bleed you dry. It's sick, honestly. Come on, let's go. The car's right there." She lunged for him again, yanking at his sleeve in a panic. But the frail invalid she was used to was gone. The man standing there now was wide awake. Julian dug his heels in, grounding himself. In one swift motion, he reached out toward the child's voice. "Little Lucecita," he said, his hand hovering in the empty space between them. "Give me your hand." "Don't touch her, Julian. You'll catch something," Vanessa shrieked. But Lucecita just offered a sad little smile, reaching out with her grimy fingers to grasp the millionaire's manicured palm. The moment skin met skin, rough against smooth, warm and alive, Julian knew it wasn't logic. It was something primal. The bone structure mirrored his own. Her fingers slotted perfectly between his. This wasn't a stranger. This was blood. "Take me," Julian commanded, gripping her hand like it was the only thing keeping him from drifting away. "Take me to Matilda. You take one step with her, and I'm gone." Vanessa played her ace, the threat of abandonment that had always brought him to heel. "You'll be all alone, blind, with no one to look after you." Julian turned his head slowly in her direction. He couldn't see her physically, yet she felt his gaze piercing right through to her soul. The coldness she found there froze the blood in her veins. "I'd rather be blind and alone than spend another second with a liar," he said, his voice like ice. "And if my mother is alive, Vanessa, you'd better pray, because God won't save you from what comes next." He stepped forward, led by the girl in the gray hoodie, walking away from his wife, his driver, and the empire of lies she had built around him. The crunch of scattered banknotes under his shoes was the only goodbye she got. The gentle chirping of park birds faded, swallowed up by the aggressive roar of the main avenue. For Julian, the world dissolved into a chaotic symphony of honking horns, screeching brakes, and the rush of busy pedestrians. Yet in that whirlwind, the only thing that felt real was the rough little hand of Lucecita anchored to his. She didn't drag him. She guided him with a fierce, protective steadiness, navigating cracked pavement and oblivious walkers with the street smarts no finishing school could ever teach. "Julian, stop this instant!" Vanessa's voice chased them, punctuated by the frantic staccato of her heels hitting the asphalt. "You're making a scene! People are staring! For God's sake, you are a De La Vega! You cannot be seen holding hands with a beggar!" Julian clenched his jaw, but didn't break stride. The darkness around him no longer felt empty. It was teeming with questions demanding answers. Every step away from his wife was a step toward a truth he feared, but needed more than oxygen. "Where are we headed, little one?" Julian asked, tuning out his wife's shrieks. His voice was raspy, thick with suppressed emotion. "To the bus stop, sir," Lucecita replied casually, as if shepherding a blind millionaire in a navy silk suit onto public transit was the most ordinary thing in the world. "The 42 drops us near the hill, but we have to hustle. If we miss it, we're stuck waiting another hour." "A bus?" Vanessa's screech pierced the air as she caught up, grabbing Julian's free arm and jerking him to a halt. "You are not getting on a German-fested bus, Julian. The doctor warned us about this. That girl isn't your niece or granddaughter. She's a professional con artist. Her mother is probably feeding her lines through an earpiece right now." Julian froze, forcing Lucecita to stop with him. He turned toward the scent of his wife's expensive perfume, a fragrance he once found elegant, but that now made his stomach turn. "Vanessa, you told me my mother died of a heart attack 3 years ago." You said you went to the hospital. You said they gave you her ashes. You claimed she didn't want to see me because she was ashamed of being poor.
And it's true,
Vanessa lied, though a slight tremor betrayed her. I did it to protect you. She hated you, Julian. She hated your success. She just wanted your money to feed her addictions. Lucecita squeezed Julian's hand. The girl looked up at the elegant blonde woman glaring down at them with a mix of desperation and venom. Grandma doesn't have addictions, the child said, her voice crystal clear. She only drinks chamomile tea, and she wrote letters to Mr. Julian every single week. Blue stationery. The words sucked the warmth right out of the air around Julian. Blue paper, he whispered, a cold shiver racing down his spine. His mother had always used that cheap blue stock to write to him at boarding school, over 20 years ago. That was a private memory, a secret detail no outsider could possibly know. Yeah, Lucecita went on, gripping the man's hand tighter. But you never got him. The lady in the red dress? She steals them from the big mailbox out front. I saw her once. I was sneaking in to drop one off, and I watched her burn them in that big white stone fireplace you got in the living room. Grandma cried a lot when she found out you never wrote back. She thought you forgot about her because you got rich. Julian's knees buckled. The image in his mind was a sledgehammer to the gut. His mother, old and modest, pouring her hope onto cheap blue paper. And Vanessa, the woman sharing his bed, tossing those words of love into the flames, laughing at his pain, weaponizing his loneliness just to keep him isolated and under her thumb. She's lying! Vanessa shrieked hysterically, glancing around at the pedestrians starting to stop and stare. She is a pathological liar. I am calling the police. You are kidnapping a disabled man against his will. No, Vanessa, Julian cut in. He ripped his arm free from his wife's grip and raised his white cane, pointing it at her like an accusing blade. Nobody is taking me anywhere against my will. I am choosing to go, and if you dare follow us or call a soul, I swear on my father's memory, by tomorrow morning I'll have my lawyers strip you of everything, even my last name. Vanessa stumbled back, her face draining of color until she was pale as a sheet. The threat of financial ruin was the only thing that truly terrified her. Julian, be serious. You can't go to the slums with that dirty brat. They'll rob you. They'll kill you. You can't see anything. Her voice wavered, oscillating between genuine rage and theatrical sobbing. I'm doing this because I love you. If you loved me, you would have loved what I love, Julian pronounced, his voice final. He softened his grip on the child's hand. Lucecita, take me to the bus. I want to go home. My real home. The girl nodded, unseen by him, and tugged him gently. Come on, Uncle Julian. The green bus is coming. They left Vanessa stranded on the curb, gasping like a fish on dry land, nails digging into her designer bag, watching her empire of lies crumble at the hands of an 8-year-old smelling of wood smoke. The bus ride was an assault on Julian's senses. Accustomed to the hermetic silence of his climate-controlled limousine, he was suddenly drowning in mechanical groans, the stench of sweat, fried food, and diesel fumes. He stumbled on the stairs, but Lucecita was there instantly, her small hand pressing against his back to guide him. Lift your foot, sir. It's a high step, she instructed. No one offered him the priority seat. Julian could feel the heavy gaze of the passengers. It wasn't admiration for his bespoke suit. It was judgment. A rich man playing tourist, or maybe a tycoon who lost it all. He could hear the murmurs. Look at his shoes. Those alone cost more than my house, someone whispered. What's he doing with Crazy Matilda's kid? Another voice answered. That comment sealed it. Crazy Matilda. That's what they called his mother. Julian felt a spike of pain in his chest, but also relief. If people knew her, she was real. She was alive. They found seats in the back. The bus lurched forward with a violent jolt that nearly floored Julian, but he death-gripped the rusty metal pole. Is it far? He asked quietly, leaning toward the girl. A little bit. We gotta cross the bridge and go up the hill, Lucecita explained. Then, struck by sudden shyness, she added, Are you really my uncle? Grandma says you're her son, But you left a long time ago and became a king. Julian smiled forcefully through his sorrow. I'm no king, little one. Just a man who was blind long before he lost his sight. He paused, searching for the right words. How is she? How is my mother?
Tell me the truth, please.
Lucasita picked at the patches on her hoodie before answering.
Grandma is tired.
Her bones hurt when it rains, and she coughs a lot from the cold. The roof has holes, and the water gets in. The girl lowered her voice. Sometimes she doesn't eat so I can have dinner. She says she isn't hungry, but I know she's lying. Her stomach makes noises. Every word was a dagger to Julian's heart. While he dined on lobster and drank vintage wines in his climate-controlled mansion, his own mother was starving and freezing just a few miles away. The guilt hit him so hard he had to remove his dark glasses to wipe the tears streaming from his useless eyes. Never again, Julian swore, clenching his jaw. She will never go hungry again, I promise you that. The bus screeched to a halt. We're here, the girl said minutes later. We're here, Lucasita announced. Stepping out of the car, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Gone was the city smog, replaced by a raw mix of damp soil, burning refuse, and the comforting scent of homemade stew. Underneath his handcrafted Italian loafers, the terrain was unforgiving, a minefield of jagged rocks and potholes. Watch your step, the girl warned, her grip tightening around his fingers. Sidewalks don't exist up here. We have to stick to the edge of the dirt path. As they moved forward, Julian felt a clumsiness he wasn't used to, a sudden, naked vulnerability. His cane clattered against hollow tin cans and loose stones, while the snarling of stray dogs echoed dangerously close to his shins. The reality hit him hard. He was miles from safety. Here, the wallet in his pocket offered zero protection against the world around him. Suddenly, the roar of a high-performance engine tore through the air behind them, closing in fast and choking them in a cloud of dust. Tires screeched as the vehicle slammed to a halt, cutting off their path. Julian knew that purr. It was the security SUV, the shadow that usually trailed him. Mr. De La Vega. The voice belonged to Ramirez, his head of security. A mountain of a man, loyal to the hand that fed him, and lately Vanessa was the one signing the checks. Miss Vanessa is frantic, sir. Orders are to bring you home immediately. By force, if it comes to that. Beside him, Julian felt Lucasita shrink away, the small girl trying to make herself invisible behind his leg. Ramirez. Julian straightened his spine, standing at his full height. Dust-covered and blind, he still commanded the air around him with effortless authority. You've been on the payroll for 10 years. You knew my father. You know exactly who I am. I do, sir. But the missus claims you're not in your right mind. Says the kid drugged you or put some kind of spell on you. The passenger door clicked open, and Vanessa's voice sliced through the air. She had tagged along with the extraction team. She didn't dare step out, terrified the slum mud might touch her designer heels. Just throw him in the car, Ramirez, she shrieked from the safety of the window. Playtime is over, Julian. Get in now, or I'll have you declared mentally incompetent and seize full control of the corporation by tomorrow morning. That was the final tumblers clicking into place. Vanessa had just dropped the mask completely. The worried wife act was gone. Standing there was nothing but a ruthless business partner, watching her most valuable asset slip away. Julian released Lucasita's hand for a heartbeat and stepped toward where Ramirez's breathing was heaviest. Ramirez, listen closely. Julian's voice turned to cold steel. You lay a finger on me or the girl, and you're finished. And I don't mean just fired. I will personally ensure you never work a security detail in this country again. However, if you step aside, get in that truck, and drive that woman far away from here, I'll triple your salary the moment I regain access to my accounts tomorrow. And make no mistake, I will get them back. A heavy silence descended. The only sounds were the SUV's engine idling and the wind rattling the corrugated tin roofs nearby. Sir, Ramirez wavered. Don't listen to him, Vanessa screeched. He's just a useless blind man.
Make the right choice, Ramirez,
Julian said, his voice softer now but unyielding. My mother is up that hill. I am going to see her.
Are you really going to stand between a man and his mother?
Ramirez let out a long, heavy sigh. The thud of a car door closing signaled his verdict. Apologies, Miss Vanessa, but I don't mess with a man's mother, the guard stated flatly.
What are you doing?
Vanessa screamed as the vehicle began to reverse. You're all traitors. Julian, you'll regret this. I hope you rot in this garbage heap. I'd take this garbage heap over your frozen palace any day, Vanessa. Julian murmured the words to the wind as the engine faded into the distance, taking with it the last tether to the life he used to know. He turned, hand sweeping the air until it rested on a small shoulder. They're gone, Lucecita. They're gone. The girl, who had been holding her breath, let out a sob of pure relief and wrapped her arms around his leg. You're brave, mister, just like the knights in the stories Grandma reads me. No, I'm not brave. Julian shook his head, smoothing her messy hair. I've just had my eyes closed for a long time, and you're finally helping me open them. Now, lead the way. I need to smell that soup. They resumed their climb up the dirt track. As the sun began to dip, the air grew sharp and cold. Yet with every step, a warmth kindled inside Julian that had nothing to do with the weather. He was walking into the unknown, into poverty, into the ghosts of his past. But for the first time in years, he knew exactly where he was going. Climbing the hill was a physical gauntlet Julian could never have fathomed in his previous life. A world shielded by tinted glass and climate control. Every stride became a war against gravity and his own darkness. The dirt path, baked hard by the sun and cracked from drought, was a treacherous map of invisible hazards. His leather soles fought for traction on the loose gravel, and more than once his ankles rolled with a sickening twist, threatening to snap. Watch out here, mister. There's a ditch full of sewage, Lucecita warned, yanking his hand hard to steer him left. Julian tried to follow her lead, but his right foot lost its purchase on the slick, muddy edge. Gravity won. He slammed into the ground, knees hitting the hard earth with a bone-jarring thud. He heard the sickening rip of expensive Italian wool giving way, followed immediately by sharp gravel chewing into his flesh. Physical pain stung, sure, but it was the searing shame that really cut deep. Here lay the mighty Julian de la Vega, titan of industry, wallowing in slum mud, sightless and filthy. Uncle, you okay? Lucecita's voice trembled with worry. Tiny fingers tugged at his sleeve, futile against his bulk. Julian just knelt there for a moment, lungs heaving. The air was thick, choking him with damp earth, wood smoke, livestock, and the distinct, unfiltered scent of struggle. I'm fine, he lied, jaw clenched tight enough to crack a tooth, bottling up a scream. He scrambled to rise, planting a hand for leverage, only to slide into something cold and slimy on the ground. Revulsion seized him. He wiped the filth onto his bespoke blazer, ruining it further. Let me help, the girl pleaded. No, he snapped, old habits of arrogance surfacing. I can manage. He swayed to his feet, gasping and grime-covered. The silence that followed was heavy. Regret hit him instantly. This wasn't some boardroom subordinate. She was his eyes. Sorry, he whispered, chin dropping to his chest. I'm not used to this, to being blind, to stumbling. It's okay, Lucecita said, her voice possessing a wisdom far too old for her years. Mama used to fall down a lot too, near the end. She said the earth was calling her for a nap because she was so tired. Julian went rigid. Your mother, he started, as they began walking again, slower this time. My sister, Sophia? Yes, Sophia. She said the name like a prayer. She talked about you, said your hair was the color of coffee, and you always had your nose in giant books. Where is she now, Lucecita? He dreaded the answer, but he had to know the extent of the damage caused by his absence and Vanessa's lies. The girl went quiet. The only sounds were a distant dog barking and the crunch of debris under their shoes. She went to heaven 2 winters ago, the child said softly. The cough took her. Grandma Matilda says her body gave out, but I think she just ran out of hope. She was waiting for your letter, Uncle. Every single day she checked the mail for Mr. Julian. After the funeral, Grandma stopped checking. Julian froze. The oxygen vanished from his lungs, knocked out as if he'd taken a physical blow to the gut. 2 winters, 2 years ago, while he was popping champagne over a billion-dollar merger in Tokyo, his sister was dying in squalor, praying for help that never came because his wife was burning the letters. Guilt wasn't just heavy, it was corrosive acid pumping through his veins. "I didn't know." His voice cracked. Tears cut paths through the mud and sweat on his face. "I swear on my life, I didn't know. Vanessa told me Sophia married some foreigner. Said she was living the high life in Europe and didn't want anything to do with me." Lies don't travel far before the truth catches them, Uncle. That's what Grandma says. Lucasita squeezed his hand. "But you're here now. That's what counts. Come on, we're close. Look for the house with the blue door." Well, most of the paint chipped off, but there's a little speck of blue left if you squint. They kept climbing. As they ascended, the urban roar faded, giving way to the intimate sounds of neighborhood life. A crackling radio playing old love songs, a baby wailing, the rhythmic chop of an axe on wood. Then, a scent stopped Julian cold. It hit him hard, anchoring his feet to the ground, not from pain this time, but from a visceral memory clawing its way up from his childhood. The distinct aroma of toasted bread and garlic. Soup. That smell threw him back 30 years, into a cramped but warm kitchen where money was tight, but love was abundant. He could almost hear his mother humming over the stove, long before his father's fortune poisoned everything, before the money built walls between their hearts. "It smells like," he stammered. "Dinner," Lucasita finished for him. "Grandma's cooking. It's a lucky day. We scored some stale loaves from the bakery downstairs. She works miracles with leftovers." They stopped before a structure. Julian couldn't see it, but the poverty radiated from it like heat. The ground shifted from dirt to cracked concrete. Above, a loose sheet of tin banged rhythmically against the roof in the wind. The whole place felt like it was holding its breath. "We're here," Lucasita whispered, dropping his hand to run ahead. "Grandma, open up, it's me. I brought a surprise." Julian stood paralyzed on the threshold, trembling. He felt like a trespasser, a ghost from the past haunting the living. He smoothed his torn jacket and ran a hand through his matted hair, grasping for a shred of dignity. But what good was dignity against the naked reality of the destitution he had allowed to happen? Slow, shuffling footsteps approached from the darkness inside, followed by the sound. It began with the grinding of a corroded bolt sliding back, followed by the scream of hinges that hadn't tasted oil in years. The door groaned open. A gust of air escaped the house, heavy with the smell of ancient, damp, rotting timber and the bittersweet aroma of simmering broth. For Julian, crossing that threshold felt less like walking into a house and more like stepping into a lost shrine. Sunlight bled through the cracks in the wooden walls, but for him, the world remained pitch black. His ears, however, painted what his eyes could not. The rhythmic plink of a leak in the corner, the lonely drone of a housefly, and the heavy, wheezing breath of an old woman standing right in front of him. "Lucasita?" Doña Matilda's voice was barely a thread, frayed by time and heartache. The iron strength Julian remembered from his boyhood was gone. It was the sound of a candle flickering out. "What kept you, child? I was starting to worry. And who is this man with you?" Julian reached up and pulled off his dark glasses. His eyes, useless windows now, were wide open and screaming for mercy. He stared blindly toward the sound, facing the dark, but in his mind's eye, the image of the woman who gave him life burned bright. "Mama." The word tore from his throat like a shard of jagged glass. A sharp clang rang out, a spoon hitting the dirt floor. Then, dead silence. In the gloom of that little room, Doña Matilde stood frozen in place. She was braced against an ancient table, a sturdy slab of wood scarred by a lifetime of use. The same surface where she'd kneaded dough for decades, wept over the death of his sister Sophia, and penned hundreds of letters that never found a home. Her hands, twisted by arthritis and hard labor, rattled violently against the rough grain. Her eyes, milky with the beginnings of cataracts, squinted at the silhouette in the doorway. The expensive suit, muddy or not, the stance, the profile. It couldn't be. Her mind played tricks on her these days, painting her son's face on strangers in the street. But this felt heavy, real.
No,
Matilda whispered, stumbling back a step and leaning hard on the table to stay upright.
impossible. My boy is gone. She told me. That blonde woman came here and swore he was dead to us, that I was dead to him.
It's a lie, Julian yelled, lurching forward and stumbling over a straw chair.
It was all a lie, Mama. I never forgot you. She told me you were the one who died. She even dragged me to a fake grave.
Matilda clamped a hand over her mouth, stifling a sob. Disbelief warred with a mother's instinct. That voice, that desperate crack in his tone. That wasn't the cold tycoon she saw in the old magazines she scavenged. That was her, Julian. That was the little boy who used to come running with scraped knees, begging for a kiss to make it better.
Julian?
She asked again, her voice breaking with a terrifying hope.
Is it really you? You're not dreaming, old girl. It's me, Mama. It's me.
Julian moved forward, navigating by the sound of her ragged breathing. He reached out, his hips bumping the edge of the table. I'm here. I'm blind, Mama. But I'm here. The moment she heard the word blind, the dam broke. The distant millionaire vanished. All she saw was her wounded child. She moved with a speed her tired legs had no business possessing, skirting the table and launching herself at him. The collision was seismic. Matilda wrapped her thin but wiry arms around him, burying her face in his mud-stained chest. Julian crumbled. He sank to his knees, pulling his mother down with him, wrapping his arms around her waist, clutching the worn fabric of her dress like a drowning man clutching a piece of driftwood.
Forgive me, please, forgive me,
Julian sobbed, over and over, weeping like an infant, his tears soaking into her shoulder. I was such a fool. I should have come myself. I should have looked for you. I let them blind me with gold long before I lost my sight. Matilda stroked his head, her fingers weaving through his chestnut hair, just as they had when he was 5 years old. She wept with him, but hers were tears of a relief so profound it washed away years of bitterness.
Shh, my baby, it's over.
Her voice found that ancient healing rhythm only mothers know. It wasn't your fault. The devil is cunning and wears fine silk, son. That woman has a black heart. But God is bigger. He brought you back to my table. Lucasita stood by the door, eyes glistening as she watched them. She quietly pushed the door shut, locking the world out. Then she stepped in and rested a hand on Julian's shoulder, closing the circle. Julian tilted his head up, groping for his mother's hands. He found them, clasped them tight, and pressed them to his lips. He felt the sandpaper skin, the calluses, the twisted knuckles. Every scar on her hands was a story of sacrifice he had failed to honor.
Your hands,
Julian choked out through his sobs. You worked yourself to the bone while I was out there living like a king.
Don't worry about my hands, son,
Matilda said, smiling through her tears as her thumb gently wiped the grime from Julian's cheek. They work just fine for holding you, and honestly, that's all that matters right now. But tell me, what happened to your sight? Why do you think I haven't seen a thing since the car crash 6 months ago? The specialists called it permanent nerve damage, a lost cause, Julian explained, the crushing weight of his disability returning. Vanessa weaponized it. She cut me off from everyone, convinced me that I was completely alone in this world, just so she could seize the assets. Matilda's soft features suddenly hardened. A dark cloud of rage passed over her kind face. She actually came here, Julian. When Sophia passed away, she rolled up in that massive luxury car, but didn't even bother to step out. She just cracked the window and tossed an envelope of cash onto the dirt. She told us, Julian sends this. Bury her and stop harassing us. She said, he isn't coming. He has an important life, and you people are garbage. I burned every single bill, son. We laid your sister to rest with whatever pennies the neighbors and I could scrape together. But listen to me, I never, ever believed you had turned cruel. I just thought you had lost your way." A wave of fury crashed over Julian, so violent it nearly knocked the wind out of him. Vanessa's malice knew no bounds. She hadn't just stolen his family time, she had tried to purchase his mother's dignity with the spare change from his own fortune. "I make you this promise, Mama," Julian said, struggling to his feet and pulling Matilda up with him. "She is going to pay for every single tear you've cried. But right now, I'm starving." Matilda let out a wet, startled chuckle at the sudden shift in tone. "Hungry? Oh, son, all we have is garlic soup and stale bread. It's not exactly fine dining." "That is exactly what I need," Julian replied, his voice steady. "I don't want caviar or truffles or anything bought with money that tore us apart. I want to sit at that battered table with you and Lucasita. I want to eat what you eat. I need to restart my life right here, from this very chair." Matilda glanced at Lucasita and gave a sharp nod. The little girl dashed off to grab 3 mismatched plates from the cupboard. Julian lowered himself onto the wooden chair, which groaned under his weight, and ran his palm across the table's surface. He traced the rough grain, the deep knife scars, the scorch marks from hot pots. This table was a topographic map of his mother's existence, a history of survival. "Lucasita told me something odd in the park," Julian said, listening to the rhythmic ladle pouring soup. "She asked, 'Can I fix your eyes?' I didn't take her seriously at first." Matilda set the steaming bowl before him and pressed a spoon into his hand. "Children perceive things we've long since gone blind to, Julian. Perhaps she's on to something. Sometimes blindness isn't in the eyes, but in the soul. And your heart? It just forced its eyes wide open." Julian took his first spoonful. The flavor was peasant simple, rustic, yet it tasted like salvation. It tasted like the truth. As he ate in that drafty shack, flanked by the only 2 humans who loved him for his essence rather than his assets, Julian de la Vega felt wealthier and more visionary than he ever had in his past life. But he knew the war was only just beginning. Out there, Vanessa's world of sharks and retainers was waiting. He would have to fight them blind and penniless to reclaim his life and demand justice. "Mom," Julian said, resting his spoon on the table. "Tomorrow they'll come for us. Lawyers. Maybe even the police. Vanessa won't let this slide." "Let them come," Matilda said, sitting beside him and gripping his hand. "We are done being afraid. You hear me? This old table has survived literal earthquakes, son. It can certainly handle a blonde woman with a few attorneys." Lucasita sat across from them, slurping her soup with enthusiasm. "Besides," the girl chirped with her mouth full, "you're Uncle Julian, and Uncle Julian looks like the kind of guy who wins." Julian smiled, a genuine expression that finally reached his unseeing eyes. "You bet, Lucasita. We're going to win." Night descended on the settlement with a heaviness Julian had never known in his life of high thread count Egyptian cotton and climate control. Here, darkness wasn't merely the absence of light. It was a physical entity. It carried a damp chill that seeped through the cracks in the rotting wood and settled deep into the marrow of his bones. Julian lay on a thin foam pad thrown directly onto the concrete floor of the tiny living area. His mother had tried to force her bed on him, but he refused flat out, threatening to sleep in the dirt outside if she didn't take her own room. Despite the spasms in his back and the grit ruining his bespoke suit, Julian felt a strange clarity of mind, even as his body remained on high alert, reacting to the foreign soundscape, the relentless barking of stray dogs, the thrum of distant reggaeton, and the occasional dry pop that sounded suspiciously like gunfire. "Uncle?" A tiny voice whispered through the gloom. Julian turned his head toward the noise, tracking the soft patter of bare feet on uneven cement. "I'm up, Lucasita. What's wrong?" "I brought you the tiger blanket." He felt the girl drape a heavy, scratchy synthetic cover over him. "It's the warmest one we have. Grandma was saving it for when an important visitor came." "You know," the voice drifted through the quiet, "you might just be the most VIP guest we've ever hosted, even with those ripped trousers." Julian grinned in the dark, fingers grazing the coarse blanket. Appreciate it, kiddo. Fits you perfectly, uncle.
Lucasita settled onto the floorboards beside him. A moment later, her voice trembled slightly.
Are you scared? Scared. Julian weighed the word, terrified of what lay ahead, of the eternal darkness, of the courtroom war on the horizon. A little bit, he admitted. What makes you ask? Because the rich folks, they're always terrified when they come up here. You hear their door locks click. They stare at us like we're wild animals. But you stayed the night. I'm not a rich man tonight, Lucasita. Right now, I'm just Matilda's boy. And it's not this place that scares me. It's what I left behind in the city. The lies I was living. A comfortable silence settled between them. Then, a thought struck Julian like a lightning bolt. He reached into his blazer's inner pocket. His fingers closed around the cold metal of his smartphone. A high-tech leash Vanessa had set up with limited voice controls, mostly so she could monitor every digital breath he took. Lucasita, I need a favor. I need to borrow your eyes one more time. He pulled the device out. Battery sat at 40%. It would have to do. What's the mission? The girl asked, leaning in. We need to crack this lock screen. Vanessa changed the passcode last week, claimed it was to stop me from pocket dialing people. Usually she grabs my finger to unlock it. But look closely at the glass. Can you see the smudge marks? Try to trace the pattern she uses. It's super smudgy, the girl murmured, taking the phone like it was a holy relic. Wait, that blonde lady? She has really long fingers, doesn't she? Yeah, I saw her at the park once. She drew a V, a big fancy V for Vanessa. Julian felt a surge of adrenaline. Of course, her vanity was her Achilles heel. Try it. Start from the top left and make a big V. Lucasita dragged her small finger across the glass. The phone chirped happily and buzzed. We're in, she whispered, barely containing her excitement. Her picture is right there. She's smiling with a little white dog. Okay, focus. Go to contacts. Search for Roberto. Not the work number. Look for Roberto private. He's an old college buddy. The only person Vanessa couldn't bribe because she absolutely can't stand him. The girl stuck the tip of her tongue out, brows furrowed in deep concentration as she scrolled through the names. Roberto. Got him. Private line, hitting green now. Put it on speaker. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. It was 11 p.m. Julian stopped breathing. If Roberto didn't pick up, it was game over. Julian? The voice was thick with sleep and confusion. Is that actually you? I've been trying to reach you for 6 months, man. That witch keeps telling me you're indisposed. Roberto, shut up and listen. I don't have much time. Julian's voice hardened, carrying a command and clarity he hadn't felt since before the crash. I'm alive. I'm sane. And I'm at my mother's house. Your mom? But I saw the obituary. Vanessa sent out the notice. It's all lies, Julian snapped. She's been keeping me prisoner in my own home, Roberto, isolating me. She convinced me my family was dead just so she could bleed me dry. I need you to move on this immediately. First thing tomorrow morning, she's filing to have me declared incompetent. She's going to claim I've lost my mind. Trauma-induced dementia, whatever sticks. Rustling sheets and the click of a bedside lamp echoed through the speaker. I knew it. I knew something didn't smell right. Julian, listen. If she holds medical power of attorney, she can have you committed involuntarily. That's exactly why I'm calling. You still have my old will? And the general power of attorney we signed 5 years ago? Pre-Vanessa? I never legally revoked that, did I? No, you never did. It's still active. Technically, that makes me your primary legal proxy, overriding her in any conflict of interest. Good. Freeze it all. Bank accounts, credit cards, corporate access. Lock it down. Flag it for fraud. Then, I need you to come get me. Don't come alone. Bring a notary. And call the press. The press? Julian, are you sure you want that circus? It'll tank the company's stock. To hell with the company, Roberto. I'm fighting for my life here. If Vanessa tries to drag me out, I want cameras rolling. Let the world see the squalor where the owner of Vega Industries' mother lives, while his wife is out dropping millions on diamonds. Understood. Where are you? Send me a pin. Lucecita? Julian called out. Do you know how to share my location? Yeah, Uncle. My mom showed me. She tapped the screen a few times. Done. It says, sent. I'll see you tomorrow, brother. And Roberto? Thank you. Get some rest, Julian. Tomorrow's gonna be a war zone. The line went dead. Julian let the phone slide onto his chest, exhaling a shaky breath. A small hand gave his fingers a squeeze.
Are we fighting dragons tomorrow?
She whispered. Yeah, kiddo. Tomorrow, we fight. But this time, I'm bringing the fire. Morning didn't break softly over the hill. It arrived with a roar. The morning chorus wasn't birdsong. It was a rough harmony of roosters screaming, delivery trucks grinding gears, and the neighborhood waking up for the daily hustle. The aroma of fresh brew, watery but piping hot, wafted through the cramped space. Morning, son, Mathilde whispered, pressing a battered tin mug into his hands. Sip it slowly, it's scalding. And I'm sorry. It's all we have. We finished the last of the bread yesterday. Julian, I promise. Mathilde sat beside him, her hand soothing his back. Just having you here is enough for me. But son, my stomach is in knots. I've been watching strange cars circling the block since dawn. Black ones, polished until they shine. Julian's muscles locked up. Vanessa hadn't wasted a second. Lucecita, Julian called out. You there? Yeah, Uncle. I'm at the window. Her voice quivered. There's a whole crowd down there. Cops, men in suits, and that lady's car, the red one. Get me up, Julian commanded. I need to be on my feet. I need to look like I'm still in charge. He hauled himself up, brushing the grime off his suit as best he could. He fixed his crooked tie and smoothed back his hair. How do I look? Like a giant, Uncle, Lucecita said, rushing to his side. Suddenly, a heavy fist hammered against the thin metal door, making the whole frame rattle. Police! Open up! The command barked from the other side. Matilda gasped, stumbling backward with her hands clutched over her heart. Stay calm, Julian ordered. He positioned himself between the women and the entrance, a blind human shield.
Let them in, Lucecita.
Trembling, the girl slid the bolt back. The door flew open, crashing violently against the concrete wall. The outside world flooded in, static from police radios, harsh voices, and the hushed gossip of nosy neighbors. Mr. Julian de la Vega, a deep voice announced. I'm Officer Mendez. We have a court order to transport you to a psychiatric facility immediately. Your wife filed a report. Charges of kidnapping and mental instability.
He is not crazy,
Matilda screamed, lunging forward, but an officer shoved her back roughly. Don't you touch my mother, Julian roared. The bass in his voice shook the room, making the officer take an instinctive step back. You lay a hand on her or the girl again, and I promise it'll be the last mistake you make in uniform. Then Vanessa stepped into the shack. The click-clack of her expensive heels was unmistakable, echoing hollowly against the cracked cement floor. Oh, Julian. Her tone was a masterclass in fake concern. Look at you. You're filthy, injured, living here among the rats? She reached out, but he slapped her hand away before it could make contact. Shh, easy now, my love. The doctor is going to give you a little shot to help you sleep. When you wake up, you'll be in your own bed, clean and safe. This whole nightmare will be over. The only nightmare in this room is you, Vanessa. Julian turned his face toward her voice, his dark glasses reflecting her silhouette. Officer, is that warrant actually signed? Yes, sir. Signed by the judge 1 hour ago. And are you aware that kidnapping a sane man, using influence peddling and perjury, is a federal crime carrying a 20-year sentence? Julian's voice was deadly calm. Vanessa let out a sharp, nervous laugh. Don't listen to him. He's delirious. Take him now. He's dangerous. 2 burly orderlies charged in, grabbing Julian by the arms. He struggled, but they were overpowering. Matilda screamed, sobbing as she clung to one of the men's legs. Lucecita sank her teeth into a hand, earning a vicious shove that sent her flying. "No!" Julian screamed as he heard her body hit the floor. "Get off me!" Just then, the thundering beat of a helicopter rotor drowned out everything, shaking the corrugated tin roof so hard it threatened to tear off. Rotor wash kicked up a massive dust storm outside. "What the hell is that?" Officer Mendez shouted, squinting through the door. A sports car screeched to a halt right at the entrance, tires smoking, closely followed by 2 news vans. "Hold it right there," a familiar voice bellowed. Roberto burst into the shack, panting, briefcase in hand, with a cameraman rolling right behind him. "Nobody touches Mr. De La Vega." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "Roberto, this has nothing to do with you. Get out." "It has everything to do with me, Vanessa." Roberto planted himself squarely between the police and his client. "Officer, I am Mr. De La Vega's personal attorney. I have a notarized affidavit, digitally signed this morning, revoking every ounce of power this woman holds over my client. And right now, we are broadcasting live to the midday news. Do you really want to be the cop who drags a blind, perfectly sane man out of his mother's home on national television?" Officer Mendez stared into the lens. He glanced at Vanessa, then immediately released his grip on Julian. "This is a civil matter," the officer said, raising his hands in surrender. "We were just following a warrant, but if there's a conflict of attorney, we're stepping back until a judge sorts it out. Pack it up, boys. We're leaving." "You can't just leave," Vanessa shrieked, her composed facade finally shattering. "I was paid. I'm your wife." The silence that followed her slip-up was heavy enough to crush bone. Julian straightened his jacket, every inch the dignity he was born with. He stepped toward the sound of her voice. "Paid, Vanessa?" he asked, his tone dangerously soft. "By whom? Or are you talking about the cash you siphoned from the emergency fund last night? It is a shame Roberto froze that account 3 hours ago. Your cards are dead plastic. Your mansion clearance is revoked. And that car outside? It belongs to the company." "No, you can't do this to me," she whispered, stumbling backward toward the exit. "I took care of you." "You tolerated me when I went blind. Actually, you buried me alive," Julian corrected her. "But you forgot one tiny detail. Seeds grow in the dark, my dear. And I have just begun to bloom." He reached his hand behind him. "Lucecita, come here." The little girl, sporting a split lip but eyes shining with pure victory, dashed to his side and grabbed his hand. "Get out of my house, Vanessa," Julian commanded. "Get out of my life. I will see you in court." Vanessa scanned the cameras trained on her face, felt the hostility of the room, and realized the game was over. She spun around and bolted, tripping through the mud outside, fleeing not just her husband, but the truth that had finally caught up to her. Julian felt the coil of tension snap within him. He turned toward the sound of his mother's weeping. "It is over, Mama." He opened his arms wide. "The monsters are gone." Roberto approached, placing a steady hand on his friend's shoulder. "Hell of a show, Julian. But now comes the hard part. You have to reclaim your empire." Julian smiled, stroking Lucecita's hair. "My empire is right here, Roberto, at this old table. Everything out there? That is just currency. And money is easy to make back. What I reclaim today has no price tag." However, as the adrenaline faded, a sharp pain spiked in Julian's skull. Behind his eyes, a jagged bolt of white light tore through his dark vision like lightning in a starless sky. He swayed on his feet. "Uncle?" Lucecita asked, voice trembling. "Are you okay, Julian?" He blinked rapidly. For a fraction of a second, just a fraction, he thought he saw a smear of red, the exact shade of Lucecita's dress. "Lucecita," he whispered, pressing his fingers to his eyelids. I think I saw something." That flash of light in the dim shack was not just a random miracle. It was the spark that lit a bonfire of urgency. Roberto, still riding the high from the police standoff, wasted zero time. The moment he heard about the red blur, he grabbed a cameraman, and together they hustled Julian into the sports car. Matilda and Lucecita scrambled into the back, clutching the leather seats in a cocktail of awe and terror. The drive to San Rafael Private Clinic, the only facility in the city not in the pocket of Vega Industries' board, was silent but thick with tension. Julian sat with his eyes squeezed shut, his fists white-knuckled in his lap. He was terrified to hope. For 6 months, he had accepted the darkness as penance for leaving his family behind. Believing he might see again felt like a gift he did not deserve. Upon arrival, the visual contrast was brutal. Matilda, in her patched dress and worn-out shoes, shrank into herself as she walked the pristine white marble halls, terrified of muddying the floor. Lucecita, on the other hand, took it all in with saucer-wide eyes. She was mesmerized by the softly humming overhead lights. "Roberto, are you sure about this?" Julian asked as nurses settled him into a wheelchair for the ophthalmology wing. "Vanessa flew me to the top specialists in Europe. They all said the same thing: irreversible optic nerve atrophy." "Vanessa took you to doctors she owned, Julian," Roberto replied, his voice hard as he signed the admission forms with barely contained rage. "I was digging through your digital insurance archives on the ride over. There are 0 records of any consultations in Europe, just receipts for cosmetic clinics and wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. Julian, it is likely you have not seen a real neurologist since the first week of your accident." The revelation hit Julian with the weight of a collapsing building. If that was true, she had not just stolen his money and time, she had stolen his light, sentencing him to darkness out of pure greed. Dr. Arriaga, an elderly man with a measured voice and steady hands, finished the preliminary exams 1 hour later. The room went quiet. In the corner, Mathilde prayed over her rosary, sliding the plastic beads through her weathered fingers. Lucecita held tight to Julian's hand, channeling that strange, electric calm she seemed to possess. "Mr. de la Vega," the doctor finally said, flicking on the wall of viewing lights, "I have good news, and I have bad news." Julian's heart skipped a beat. "Give me the truth, doctor. I have had enough lies to last a lifetime." "The bad news," the doctor began, "is that you have a severe edema that has partially calcified due to lack of treatment. That optic nerve has been under crushing pressure for months. Those migraines aren't just stress. They're his brain begging for room to breathe." "And the good news?" Roberto cut in, anxious. "The good news is the nerve isn't dead. It's just dormant. Suffocated, yes, but still very much alive. That flash he saw? That was the nerve firing in response to a sudden pressure shift. Maybe the adrenaline or physical exertion. If we go in now, tonight, I give him a 60% shot at getting his sight back. It won't be perfect immediately, but he will see." A sharp sob pierced the quiet room. It didn't come from Julian. It was Matilda. The old woman stepped up to the gurney, pushing aside any shame about her worn-out clothes, and cradled her son's face in her hands. "God is great," she wept. "I told you, mijo. I told you." "That little girl healed your soul, and now the Lord is going to heal your eyes." Julian fumbled for his mother's hands, pressing them to his lips. "No, Mama. You two saved me. If I hadn't climbed that hill, if I hadn't eaten that soup, I never would have known I had any fight left in me." "There are risks," the doctor warned, lowering his voice. "This is a complex procedure. If we release the pressure too quickly, he could hemorrhage. He could lose his vision permanently, or even stroke out. I need your consent right now." Julian didn't hesitate for a heartbeat. "Do it, doctor. I'd rather die trying to see my mother's face one last time than live 100 years in the dark with that woman." The next few hours were a blur of motion. Nurses rushing, IV lines being prepped, the sterile sting of antiseptic overpowering the scent of wood smoke and poverty clinging to Julian's clothes. Before they wheeled him into the OR, he asked for a private moment with them. In that hospital gown, Julian looked smaller, more fragile. Yet his face held a strange sense of peace. "Mama," he said, reaching into the darkness until he found Matilda's shoulder. "If this goes sideways, if I don't wake up, Roberto has his orders. Everything I own goes to you and Lucecita. The house, the money, all of it. Vanessa won't see a single dime." "Hush your mouth, boy," Matilda scolded gently, smoothing back his hair. You are going to wake up, and you are going to be starving. I'm going to make you a proper chicken broth. Not this dishwater they serve here. Stop talking about wills and start talking about living. Julian turned his head toward the little girl. Lucecita? I'm right here, Uncle. You told me something in the park. I can fix your eyes, you said. Did you know something the doctors missed? How? The girl shrugged, a quiet movement Julian somehow sensed in the air. Because eyes don't lie, Uncle. Yours were always moving, hunting for the light. That lady in the red dress. Her eyes were still, like a shark's. Dead things don't look for light. But you? You were searching. A smile touched Julian's lips as a single tear escaped. Promise me you'll watch over Grandma while I'm under. I promise. And I promise that when you wake up, I'll be right there to tell you the color of everything. Then the orderlies arrived. The goodbye was short. The swinging doors slapped shut, stranding Matilda and Lucecita in an opulent waiting room. They were surrounded by glossy magazines they couldn't really read and people glancing sideways with judgment, unaware that these two beggars were the only family of the wealthiest man in the city. The clock on the wall ticked past 3 in the morning. The ticking was relentless, monotonous, hypnotic, bordering on psychological torture. Matilda had finally drifted off in the stiff chair, her head resting on Roberto's shoulder. Despite his $5,000 suit, the lawyer hadn't moved an inch, terrified of waking her. Lucecita was wide awake on the floor, sketching with some crayons a kind nurse had given her, using the back of some old medical forms as a canvas. She was drawing a massive dinner table with 3 smiling figures, all sitting under a giant yellow sun that took up nearly the entire page. Suddenly, the operating room doors swung open. Dr. Arriaga emerged, peeling off his surgical mask. He looked absolutely wrecked. Deep bags hung under his eyes, and sweat had soaked through the collar of his green scrubs. Roberto jolted awake, gently rousing Matilda in the process. "Doctor?" he rasped, his voice thick with sleep. Matilda scrambled to her feet, clutching her rosary to her chest so hard her knuckles turned bone white. The surgery was complicated, the doctor started, and Matilda's heart missed a beat. There was significantly more calcification than we anticipated. We had to rebuild some of the surrounding tissue. "But is he all right?" Matilda pressed, her voice cracking with panic. "He's stable. He's in the recovery room right now, and the anesthesia is wearing off." The doctor paused, his heavy gaze settling on the 3 of them. "But we won't know if it actually worked until the bandages come off. We need to wait a few hours for the swelling to subside. However, he did react to the pen light while he was still under. That is a very promising sign." Matilda finally let out the breath she'd been holding and crossed herself. "Thank you, Blessed Mother. Thank you." 6 more hours crawled by. By the time dawn broke, sunlight was creeping through the blinds of Private Suite 402. Julian sat upright in the hospital bed, his head encased in a heavy helmet of thick white gauze. Sleep was impossible. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the bedding, anxiety radiating from him in waves. "Are you guys still there?" It was the 10th time he'd asked in as many minutes. "We're right here, son," Matilda soothed, wrapping her warm, calloused fingers around his right hand. "I've got your other side, Uncle," Lucecita chimed in, squeezing his left hand. "And I'm on guard duty," Roberto called out from the couch, trying to force a joke. "No blonde witch is getting past me." Despite the banter, he was sweating bullets. Just then, Dr. Arriaga walked in, flanked by a nurse holding a pair of medical shears. "All right, Mr. De La Vega, let's do this. Keep your eyelids shut tight while I work on these layers. When I give the signal, open them slowly. The light is going to sting. Everything will look blurry at first. Don't panic, that's expected." Julian nodded, the blood rushing in his ears, sounding like a heavy war drum. The snip-snip of the metal blades against the gauze felt impossibly loud in the silence. Slowly, the pressure around his skull lifted. Cool air brushed against his face, a sensation he hadn't felt in what seemed like a lifetime. "Done," the doctor announced. "I've dimmed the room. Take your time, Julian. Open them." He took a shaky breath. Terror froze him for a heartbeat. What if the darkness was permanent? What if this whole recovery was just a cruel delusion? Then he grounded himself in the rough texture of his mother's palm and the tiny, fragile grip of Lucecita. They were real. Even if he remained blind, their presence was enough. Finding his courage, he lifted his eyelids. Pain hit him instantly. It was sharp and blinding, like 1,000 needles of light piercing retinas that had forgotten the sun. He slammed them shut, groaning. "Easy, that's normal," the doctor assured him. "Try again. Rapid blinks this time." Julian forced himself. It was a gray, undefined haze, but it was definitely light. Reflexive tears washed over his eyes, clearing away the fog until shapes began to emerge. Blobs of color materialized. A white patch. That had to be the doctor. A dark, looming shape. Roberto. And right beside him were two distinct colors, gray and red. His mother's sweater and the red dress the hospital staff had given Lucecita to replace her ruined clothes. Julian blinked hard, fighting to bring the world into focus. Slowly, the blur sharpened, like an old camera lens finally finding its range. A face appeared. It was etched with deep lines, framed by messy white hair, with watery eyes gazing at him with absolute adoration. This wasn't the young woman from his childhood memories. She looked old and exhausted, yet to him, she was the most beautiful sight in the universe. "Mom," Julian whispered, his voice cracking. You got old." Mathilde burst into a tearful laugh, a sound sweeter than any symphony. "And you're skinny and look terrified, my baby boy." Julian shifted his gaze downward. There was the little girl from the park, scrubbed clean now, but she still held on to that wild, dignified spirit. Her large, dark eyes studied him anxiously. He noticed a tiny scar on her chin, a single freckle on her nose. It was undeniable. He saw his sister Sophia staring back at him through this child's face. "Lucecita," Julian murmured. His trembling hand reached out, no longer searching blindly, but landing perfectly on her cheek. You look just like her." "Can you see me, Uncle?" she asked, desperate for confirmation. "Really?" "I see you," Julian sobbed, finally letting go. It was a cry of pure release. "I see you. Your eyes, your nose. I see everything." "It worked!" Roberto shouted, punching the air in victory. The doctor offered a satisfied smile and quietly slipped out of the room to give the family their moment. Julian stared at his own palms, the bedsheets, the corners of the room. It was all miraculous. Even the dull beige paint on the walls looked like a masterpiece to him. Dust motes dancing in a sunbeam looked like high art. "I'm sorry," Julian choked out, locking eyes with his mother and niece, truly connecting for the first time. "Forgive me for not seeing what was right in front of me. I was blind long before the accident happened. I missed everything that actually mattered." Matilda leaned in, kissing his forehead right where Lucecita had touched him back at the park. "God works in mysterious ways, son. Sometimes the path is crooked, but the destination is true. You had to lose your sight to really learn how to see. But now you've got work to do." Julian nodded slowly. His face shifted, the vulnerability hardening into steel resolve. He turned to his friend. "Roberto, hand me a mirror." Roberto hesitated, then pulled out his phone and flipped it to the front-facing camera. Julian stared at his reflection on the screen. He took in the dark circles, the stubble, the gauze. But mostly he noticed his eyes. The milky, dead haze was gone. His pupils were sharp, reactive, alive. These were the eyes of a man who had walked through hell and come back. "Put it away," Julian said, shoving the phone back. "And gear up. The second I'm discharged, we're heading to the mansion. I have some unfinished business with my wife, and she's got nowhere left to hide." Lucecita climbed onto the bed with gentle care, curling up tightly against his side. "Uncle, now that you can see, can we go look at the ocean? Grandma says it's as big as the sky, but down on the ground. I've never been there." Julian wrapped one arm around the child and the other around his mother, squeezing his eyes shut for a beat. Not from darkness, but from overwhelming gratitude. "We'll go to the sea, little light. We'll go anywhere you dream of. But first, we have to take back the life they stole from us." The sterile, chilly hospital room suddenly felt warmer than any house Julian had ever lived in. The physical healing was over, but the reckoning? That was just beginning. The De La Vega estate loomed over the city's most expensive hill, a monument of glass and marble shimmering under the afternoon sun. Yet inside, the air was thick with the stench of panic. Vanessa paced frantically across the main study, once Julian's sanctuary, now twisted into her personal war room. Valuable canvases had been ripped from the walls, leaving behind pale rectangular scars on the silk wallpaper. Atop the mahogany desk, 3 gaping suitcases spewed designer gowns, jewelry cases, and stacks of cash. With messy hair and makeup streaked by nervous sweat, Vanessa raided the hidden safe behind a false panel in the library. Her hands trembled as she stuffed bearer bonds and deeds into a leather satchel. "Damn it, damn it, damn it," she hissed through gritted teeth, shooting paranoid glances at the locked door. "That idiot lawyer froze the bank accounts, but he doesn't know about the stash in Panama or Julian's grandmother's diamonds. I have to get out before the judge signs the eviction order." The phone in her pocket buzzed. She ignored it. She knew exactly who was calling. Business partners jumping ship after the news broke, and high society friends pretending they never knew her name. She was on her own, but she didn't care, she thought as she slammed the safe shut. With the fortune in those bags, she could restart in Europe, far away from that useless blind fool and his family of rats. "Just need to make it to the airport," she muttered, sipping up the last bag. She smoothed out the wrinkles in her skirt. Taking a deep breath to reassemble her mask of ice, she dragged the luggage toward the exit. She threw open the double doors, mouth open to scream at the staff for help, but froze. The suitcases slipped from her grip, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. Standing dead center on the geometric floor tiles of the grand foyer was Julian. He was cleaned up, wearing an impeccable gray suit Roberto had procured. And though the dark glasses were still in place, his posture bore no trace of the broken man she had puppet-mastered for months. He stood tall and still, like a statue carved from vengeance. Behind him, flanking him like sentinels, stood Roberto, 2 high-ranking police officers, and, to Vanessa's horror, old Matilda and that filthy brat, Lucasita. But they weren't filthy anymore. Matilda wore a simple, dignified dress, and the girl's hair was neatly brushed as she held Julian's hand with fierce pride. "Going somewhere, Vanessa?" Julian asked. His voice cut through the foyer's perfect acoustics, calm and lethal. Vanessa gasped, her calculating brain spinning into overdrive. He was still wearing the shades. He still couldn't see. She could play him one last time. "Julian, my love," she cried, instantly switching her tone to hysterical relief. She stepped over the bags, moving toward him. "Thank God you're here. Those awful men told me you were stuck in the hospital. I was packing our things so we could leave." "We have to run, darling. Roberto is lying to you. He wants to steal the company, and those people he brought are in on it." She closed the distance, reaching out to touch her husband's face, using the same caress that had emotionally sedated him so many times. "Let's go, Julian. I have a plane waiting. I'll take you to Switzerland. We'll find a real doctor, just you and me, far away from these people trying to hurt you." Julian didn't flinch. He let her get close. He let those hands, scented with the expensive perfume that now turned his stomach, rest on his cheeks. "To Switzerland?" Julian asked softly. "To the same imaginary doctor who diagnosed my irreversible atrophy?" Vanessa froze. Her fingers went rigid against his skin. What are you talking about?" she whispered, a tremor of fear leaking into her voice. "I just want to take care of you. Without me, you're lost in the dark, Julian. You need me. I am your eyes. You were never my eyes, Vanessa. You were my blindfold." With a slow, deliberate motion, Julian raised his hands and removed the dark glasses. Vanessa stifled a scream and scrambled backward, her own feet tangling in a clumsy retreat. Julian's eyes, though still bloodshot from the recent surgery, were wide open and locked onto her. There was a devastating clarity in that stare, tracking her every twitch with predator-like precision. The vacant look was gone, replaced by cold judgment. "Julian?" she stammered, the color draining from her face until she looked like a ghost. "You know, that red dress really doesn't suit you, Vanessa," Julian said, his gaze sweeping over her. "I always imagined it had a certain elegance. But now that I can see, I realize it's just tacky. Like you." The truth slammed into her with the force of a freight train. He could see. The game was up. No more control. No more lies about burnt letters or dead mothers. Vanessa's eyes darted to the suitcases stuffed with cash and jewels. Her survival instinct kicked into overdrive. Dropping the facade of the loving wife, she lunged desperately for the bags.
"That's mine!"
She shrieked, white-knuckling the handle. "I have rights! I'm your wife! I'm entitled to half of everything!" "You're entitled to nothing," Roberto cut in, stepping forward with a blue folder in hand. "We've audited the books, Vanessa. Embezzlement, forgery, insurance fraud. And the kicker? Abandonment of an incapacitated person." "Officers," Julian commanded, never breaking eye contact with the woman who had sworn to cherish him. "Get her out of my sight. And the bags stay. Every cent inside goes to the foundation I'm launching in my sister Sophia's name." The officers closed in. Vanessa fought back, clawing and spitting insults that echoed off the marble walls. "Damn you, Julian," she screeched as the cuffs clicked shut. "You were a pathetic cripple. I made you a man. You should be thanking me. You're nothing without me. Nothing." Julian raised his voice, cutting through her hysteria. "Without you, I'm free." As they dragged her toward the exit, Vanessa's eyes met Matilda's. The older woman, who had been watching in silence, stepped into the light. Her face held no hatred, only a deep, boundless pity. "May God forgive you, child," Matilda said softly, "because you're going to have a long, lonely time to think about what you've done." Vanessa spat at the old woman's feet before being shoved into the cruiser, the swirling red and blue lights washing over the front lawn. Silence reclaimed the foyer. A clean, heavy silence. Julian let out a long breath, like he'd been holding it for years. He turned to face his mother and his niece. For the first time, he saw his own home through healed eyes. He saw the cold opulence, the uncomfortable furniture, the pretentious art. "It's so big," Lucasita whispered, jaw dropped, staring at the vaulted ceiling. "And echoey. Did you really live here all by yourself, Uncle?" "Yeah, kiddo, all by myself," Julian replied, kneeling down to meet her eye level. He gently stroked her cheek, marveling once again at the miracle of seeing her skin tone, the sparkle in her eyes. But those days are over. "This house, it has no warmth. What are we going to do?" Matilda asked, looking around timidly. Julian stood up and looked at his lawyer. "Roberto, list the house tomorrow morning. Sell the furniture, the paintings, the cars. Sell it all. I don't want any of it." "But where will you live?" the lawyer asked, stunned. Julian gazed out the massive windows at the horizon, where the setting sun was painting the sky in violent oranges and violets, colors he drank in with thirsty gratitude. "Lucasita wants to see the ocean," Julian said, a smile spreading across his face. "And Mom deserves a garden where she can plant whatever she wants without asking permission. We're going to find a home, Roberto. Not a mansion, a real home." Without another word, Julian walked toward the kitchen. While everyone watched in confusion, he returned minutes later. Not with jewels or documents, but with a hunk of bread and some cheese he'd scrounged from the pantry. He sat right there on the marble floor of the foyer, crossed his legs, and patted the spot next to him. "I'm starving," he said, looking at his mother and niece. "And this is the only table that matters right now. The one we make together." Matilda smiled through tear-filled eyes and settled onto the floor beside him. Lucasita dove into the space between them. Roberto loosened his silk tie, shrugged, and sat down to complete the circle. There, on the cold floor of a multi-million-dollar mansion, void of love but overflowing with hope, the De La Vega family shared their first dinner as free people. 1 year later. The gentle crash of waves against the shore became the constant soundtrack of the White House. It wasn't a mansion, but it was open and airy, with massive windows inviting in the salty Pacific breeze and the golden afternoon light. The backyard boasted no imported marble statues, no hedges clipped into obsessive geometric shapes. Instead, it was a riot of color. Bougainvillea, rose bushes, and fruit trees bursting with wild vitality under Doña Matilde's loving care. Julián relaxed on the patio, a paperback resting comfortably in his grip. No headphones, no audio narration, just crisp black ink on the page, devoured by hungry eyes. Every few minutes he'd pause, not to think, but just to marvel at the curve of a letter or the grain of the paper against the dark type. Sure, he had specs on, but they were just standard readers, nothing but a mild prescription. The spark was back in his gaze, framed by crow's feet carved from joy rather than grief. "Uncle Julián, watch this!" The shout drifted up from the shoreline 50 meters out. Julián glanced up, his vision sharp and effortless. No squinting required. He could see every detail of the girl dashing across the wet sand. Lucecita had shot up like a weed, and those old gray rags were history. Now she rocked a bright yellow swimsuit, chasing a golden retriever crashing through the surf. She looked radiant, strong and full of life. "I've got eyes on you, little light," he hollered back, waving an arm. "Watch out for that riptide." "I'm fine. I'm a pro now," she yelled before ducking under a breaker. Julián grinned, snapping his book shut. A deep, steady warmth settled in his chest. Pure contentment. He'd spent the last year overhauling Vega Industries, tearing out Vanessa's rot and steering the corporate ship toward humanitarian work. Yet his biggest win wasn't on a spreadsheet. It was playing in the surf right in front of him. "Julián, sweetheart, give me a hand." Matilda's voice floated out from the house. Julián stretched, stood up, and headed for the kitchen, the soul of their home. The air was thick with the scent of lime, cilantro, and frying batter. Matilde stood at the range, humming an old bolero, looking years younger. The warm weather and decent meals had done wonders for the ache in her bones. Her hands still bore the twisted shape of a lifetime of hard labor. But these days, they only touched fresh herbs and garden blooms. "What can I do for you, Mom?" "Drag the table out back. Roberto and his wife just pulled up with the dessert. Lucecita wants a picnic under the mango tree." "Which table? The fancy teak one?" Matilda spun around, eyebrow cocked and eyes dancing with mischief. "No, boy. The table. Our table." Julián cracked up. There it was, tucked in the corner of the sleek, modern kitchen, a battered wooden relic clashing magnificently with the stainless steel appliances. They'd hauled it all the way from the shack up on the hill. The moving costs alone were higher than the price of brand new furniture. But Julián wouldn't have it any other way. A pro had smoothed it down to prevent splinters, but he kept every scratch, knife mark, and burn. It was his anchor. Julián hoisted it up. It was heavy, but it felt good in his arms. He muscled it out to the yard, planting it deep in the mango tree's shade with a perfect view of the ocean. Roberto came strolling down the driveway, bakery box in hand, his wife following close behind. Julián grabbed the lawyer in a bear hug. "You're looking sharp, Roberto. What's the latest from the eye specialist?" 20/20 vision in the right, near perfect in the left, Julián said, smoothing out the tablecloth. "He's calling it a medical miracle. Personally, I think it's Mom's soup." Just then, Lucecita stormed in from the beach, dripping wet and covered in grit, with the dog shaking water all over the guests. The group erupted in squeals and laughter. "Go wash up, young lady," Matilda commanded, marching out with a clay pot. "No one brings sand to my dinner table." A few minutes later, the whole crew was gathered around that battered wood. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting everything in royal gold. The spread was simple but incredible. Fresh ceviche, rice, fried catch of the day, and sweet plantains. Julián took it all in. He soaked up the vivid reds of the garden, the deep navy of the ocean, and the sun-kissed flush on his niece's cheeks. He saw the tranquility in his mother's gaze and the loyalty etched on his friend's face. "I'd like to propose a toast," Julián said, raising his wine glass. The table went quiet as glasses went up. Lucecita proudly hoisted her orange juice. 1 year ago, Julian started, his voice cracking just a bit. I was sitting on a park bench, convinced my life was over. I was trapped in the dark, and I don't just mean my eyesight. I thought wealth was the only thing that mattered, so I thought I had nothing left. He caught Lucecita's eye. Then this little girl put her hand on my forehead and said something crazy. She asked, "Can I heal your eyes?" I didn't buy it, but she wasn't talking about corneas or optic nerves. She was talking about seeing the truth. He turned to Matilda. "You all taught me that real blindness isn't physical. It's indifference. It's forgetting your roots and the people who actually give a damn about you. I can see this sunset today, and yeah, it's stunning. But nothing my eyes take in now is as beautiful as the way I felt when you held me in that dark shack back when I had nothing." Julian reached out, gripping his mother's and niece's hands across the rough, scarred wood of the table. "To true vision," Julian said, raising his glass. "To seeing with the heart, and to this fellowship. May we always find our way back to this table, no matter where life takes us." "Cheers!" they shouted, their voices rising as one. Glass chimed against glass, and a wave of laughter broke out, blending perfectly with the roar of the ocean. As the sun dipped below the horizon, surrendering the sky to a canopy of stars, Julian focused on Lucecita. She was animated, waving her arms wildly as she reenacted catching a massive wave for a captivated Roberto. Julian slid his reading glasses off his nose and set them gently on the wood. He was done with lenses. He didn't need filters to see the truth anymore. He tilted his head back, fixing his gaze on the first star burning in the night sky, and whispered a quiet confession, words meant for the sister watching over him. "I see it, Sophia. I finally see it all clearly now." The shot widens, pulling back to reveal the joyous group gathered around the humble wooden planks in their slice of paradise, until the scene dissolves into the starlight and fades to black. The end.